For if it's science-wise, just now you mentioned it's the kind of stress where you have to deal with people passing away. Is that true?
It's very easy to paint something fatalistic or tough, especially when the school wants you to exceed, to be a star designer at the end of the day. But it's only true that it's a tough life if you do not want to be a true expert in anything in life and live by entitlement as if it's dropped on your lap, All professions need some level of aptitude, deep commitment and effort. Loneliness is one of the biggest killers.
Yeah, so by having all these little kampongs around the different clusters of Singapore, I think it actually helps to create a social setting.
Yes, a true architect needs no awards nor monuments. In fact, our best epithet is, as Latin would say, si monumentum requiris circumspice or circumspice, which translates to, if you seek his monument, look around you.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Creative Circuit. And today we have a very special guest with us. He wears many hats. A master planner, urban designer, architect, and interior designer. He's an ex-managing director, founder of CPG Signature Private Limited, chairman SIA Wellbeing Committee, advisor for SIA Sustainability Committee, and adjunct lecturer and curriculum writer, Temasek Poly. Then here we have Chee Yung.
Thank you.
Okay, Chee Yung, do you want to introduce more about yourself? And what do you do and how do you fall in love with architecture?
I've been practicing for the past 30 years in architecture and I've worked on about 500 plus projects, plus some of them fortunately winning about 20 plus international design awards. I've actually kind of evolved over time, right? Right now, other than practicing myself as an architect, I'm actually part of the Consulus Group as the managing partner on consulting and helping companies in their strategic directions in transformation. As for what drew me into architecture and urban planning in the first place, let's start. It's quite a long story, but I try to condense it. I came to Singapore in 1988 under a scholarship and with the hopes of being a doctor. Even represented junior college in medical quizzes. However, I soon realized I was kind of too sensitive and will be stressed if patients go downhill or at worst, pass away which is actually quite inevitable in the medical profession. So I reflected deeply on what I can excel without the stress. And since I was fortunately a natural artist, I kind of take art exams just to get an A. I searched and found architecture, which also has a combination of sciences and art, right? Despite being offered places in some medical schools, I decided I can heal the environment and be sensitive to place to really contribute. One very coincidental fact is that after 13 years of practice, I joined CPG and I ended up designing and master planning 2 medical campuses, the Duke GMS and Yong Lin School of Medicine, 3 overseas campuses, Changi Hospital campus, and even worked on the nursing home design guidebook. And now teach biophysics design and well-being in nature at University of the Arts Singapore. So, in a very roundabout way, I'm a key contributor to healthcare after all.
For if it's science-wise, just now you mentioned it's the kind of stress where you have to deal with people passing away. But in terms of architecture, there is also its own level of stress. Yeah, it's just a different kind of stress. So my university lecturer actually told us this one thing, that if you want an easy life, don't do architecture and interior design. Is that true?
It's very easy to paint something fatalistic or tough, especially when the school wants you to exceed, to be a star designer at the end of the day. But it's only true that it's a tough life if you do not want to be a true expert in anything in life and live by entitlement as if it's dropped on your lap, All professions need some level of aptitude, deep commitment and effort. Since I could design, search for solutions and be on site leading my team endless hours without feeling stressed, it has been quite natural for me. the human dynamics and running a business is often harder than the design work.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
So, as a young designer, when you first graduated, were there any challenges that you faced in view with the experienced designers or architects that are already in the industry?
Yes, I worked with a lot of overseas architects. Of course, when I was in CPG, we really worked with very, very world-class architects. We had to make whatever they come, dream up work in the local context. That was, in some sense, a tough part and challenging part. But the hardest lesson I learned as a young architect is that we tend to graduate wanting to be a star architect. Therefore, we want to control every single outcome, by working harder, right? And be original and designing it by myself using my own skill. Trying to be the genius. Now I deeply appreciate and build upon unity and teamwork and truly enjoy the co-creation process because you're actually designing for people. You're not designing for yourself, right? So eventually, not even for people, the environment, when birds start to fly into your development, start singing the morning chorus, right? That's the perfect combination. Yeah.
So in this case, how do you actually balance between what truly represents you as an architect or an urban planner in comparison to the client's needs and also in terms of the environment that the building sits on?
So a lot of times, we have the client who's the developer, right? Obviously, the developer is looking to gain as much gross development value, GDV, right? Okay. And also value in terms of leasing value, etc. Right? That is the main aim from the client's point of view. Of course, if the design is really iconic, right, it improves their brand, right? But from the consumer's point of view, right, they want convenience, right? And eventually have a mental map to move intuitively through the commercial and service spaces. So sometimes I actually wear this transit-oriented designer hat where I try to create footfall zones as one transitions from one mode of transport to another. This allows segregation of traffic, safety, efficiency, while bringing business and UX via curation of these high footfall areas. And also in terms of experience, I think the more users are empowered, right, and participate, in the space, then this idea of place starts to emerge. Yeah, because it cannot be just a pop-up.
So yeah,
A pop-up is almost like a flash in the pan, a rara show.
very decorative.
Rara show. I mean, you can put up something that's very novel, like a tentage, and do a pop-up for a weekend or two, but it's not going to last. It's like a pasar malam. It just doesn't continue that. You would like to continue this participatory, people coming in and you contribute to the design, contribute to the events and placemaking. So that is the biggest challenge and something I hope to work on in future.
Then you mentioned that because you are very interested in science, and then given that now you're combining architecture and science with urban planning, master planning, interior design, is that one of the key factors why you ended up doing more of neuro design, trying to understand human behavior and human nature? Or how do you actually derive your design philosophy into this aspect?
Actually, all these things come about for me and anyway in a very coincidental manner. Just like Singapore started off wanting to be a garden city, right? Then when we started to have green buffers and link all the greens together, start to make the canals, active, beautiful and clean, right? Suddenly we realized we are in a net of green, so become a city in a garden, right? Later on, these green buffers will start to regenerate the wildlife and eventually invite otters to come back. So suddenly we realize we are a city in nature. So I would say that this idea of neuro design is also something that evolved very recently because we started to understand that the human mind is not something that is random. It is triggered by different sensory, different situational ideas, right? Circumstance. And we are starting to measure it. And That's why this idea of well-being is not just wellness. No, well-being is really important. We can start to measure well-being in our design. Everything has to be a lot more intentional, right? And not intentional without being manipulative. You know, people need to kind of immerse themselves, be comfortable, and join in the game of life, right? The play of life.
I think that's why makes architecture or even the things around us meaningful, right? And not just anything decorative or pasar malam style. It gives purpose and meaning to what we see around us and how we actually react to the things around.
Yes, you're not just going there to buy something. No, you're going there to participate. You're going there to contribute to the vibrancy, right? I think a lot of cities are very dense, but they feel crowded versus vibrant. So there are two differences, right? Again, in terms of there's difference between the two, right? We want vibrancy, we don't want crowdedness, right? And I think Singapore has this opportunity to be both. Depends on how we design it.
So is it more difficult to design something meaningful in terms of a macro scale of things?
For me, having the macro to micro experience, everything actually means a lot. I can see your home, you have plenty of bears.
Tell my mom.
It doesn't matter, right? Because that's the first thing I observe, right? Obviously, the bear is something that feels like home and warm.
Yeah.
I would echo it, right? So I would say that at the macro level, you echo certain things that the community feels like their identity. Like in Singapore, maybe the garden is their identity, right? Then as you cascade down to the precincts, it might be the food areas that's their identity, right? Then into the home, then it becomes the bear, right? So I think these layers of understanding will create these levels of meaning, because meaning is not derived from what we tell from our narrative, but the narrative that the users generate in their own minds, and they can remember and they can think of fondly, right? Recall fondly. Yeah.
Okay, so in this case, at what point does urban planning become an experience rather than just a functional space? Because you mentioned if like we can have a structure, a temporary structure in a place for 1 week, and then people just use it as a shelter whenever they pass by. At what point, in terms of scale, do you actually do master planning mainly as a full experience? Whether is it surrounding of the building or inside the building, how do you work around?
The way we work as a master planner is that we study the demographics, study their patterns, user patterns, and design in such a way that there are little circuits around where people can utilize almost like an activity calendar of that space, that they can participate different times, different hours, right? Different groups. And you need to figure out how these groups move around in terms of pattern. So once you create that kind of pattern, the groups will straight away, you'll be surprised, right? It becomes very intuitive the way they move in that space. You're not forcing them, For example, for Tai Chi, you say, right? Gatherings, right? They need, mostly it's in the morning or evening, and they need a place where there is a bit of shelter, breezy, like, because they are not walking, they're not moving very fast, but needs to be breezy, fresh, and then, and calming, right? So once you create that kind of space, then people will naturally gravitate there. And over time, right, they might even, businesses that think to Tai Chi will kind of pop up, whether it's a TCM place, or pop up, breakfasts and things like that, right? And sometimes if you have a playground, for example, that's designed really beautifully, and beside this Tai Chi place or whatever, then the childcare may pop up. So these are the ways to, at least at the urban scale or precinct scale, you could start to curate this whole experience. And over time, people will start to, it should be alive. It should be a live tapestry, right? That people can participate, contribute, do a bit more. If the Tai Chi people are also, Chinese medicine people, they will plant Chinese herbs around, the kind of thing, right? So I hope that this kind of participatory, having ownership, will happen over time.
So as you mentioned, a lot of times it's the human nature that whether is it a public space or a private space that makes the space meaningful. If let's say we were to remove the human nature first, we put architecture first, do you think in any chance an urban space or an architecture building itself, the physical building or the physical space itself can actually evoke emotion to the consumer, the user, rather than the other way around?
Architecture from a traditional practice point of view is based on historical architects. For example, if you talk about the Stone Age, then you do a Stonehenge, they call it megalithic, right? Then at the end of the Copper Age, you have pyramids, whatever. Then the Golden Age of civilizations, you have the Greek columns and like Parthenon. These are just stylistic representations of that time. And we recognize them because it's embedded in our language and culture, right? But taking from the neuro design point of view, there are actually more intuitive type of architects. For example, the need for what we call refuge, a place for refuge and prospect. So you can stay in one place and actually look out and see whether it's safe or not. These are very, very more intuitive and more human nature type of design. Every design is an intervention into the space. The question is that, do you change the character of the space? Or you enrich the character of the space? So hopefully we do the latter.
Because in, like, say, CBD area, where majority of the building, the skyscraper, I understand is because it's commercialized space, it's all for functional reasons. How do you think Singapore architecture or urban planning in terms of the outlook of all this architecture and design is comparing to all these glass facades? How do you think, maybe say for example, are there something that we can improve to improve the mental well-being of, say for example, CBD?
What we found in terms of neuro design or neurourbanism is that when you have a very plain, very clean facade, whether it's glass or white, painted or cladding, right, it doesn't look like a face. Therefore, it doesn't retain the eye. So the eye will just wander around because they don't recognize anything. And worst thing is that people don't recognize it as a place because there's nothing there. Yeah. Right? Okay. Why a facade is called facade? Because it's face. Right? So I think over time we start to recognize this, that less is not necessarily more. Right? It depends on how you execute it. Right? If the less is expressed in texture, then people can remember. But if it's just white, you can't remember anything, right? Or just glass, you can't remember. In the CBD, why these buildings are designed this way actually is for flexibility, because they can change the office and all that. They kind of copy New York. If you read the book Delirious New York, like Remco Haas, those buildings can be any character internally. So they are just pandering to the fantasies of whoever is developing the interior space or the space within. But the space without is just a box. Right? Okay. And like a place in New York, the real buzz of the vibrancy of the space is the street. It's the streetscape. People meet there, they have coffee there, right? And things like that. So I think in the CBD, we are trying to recreate that kind of a buzz. It's actually very, very different from a village-like design, right? Which is more kind of pattern language style design. So with the CBD, we want to optimize the space. We want to make it simple to clean, that kind of thing. Right? So the interiors actually have less character. Exterior has less character. Yeah. But the interiors themselves, they can change character over time. So it's a bit different. Can it be better? I think Singapore is trying to evolve it to be better. You can see, like Park Royal, Pickering, and a lot of buildings starting to have layers of green into it, right? The latest claddings in Chinatown start to have more timber feel, so it's warmer, things like that. So they are very conscious design vocabulary that's building up. Even like Capita Spring, right?
Yes.
So it starts to have this kind of different characters that are being built into the urban fabric, including bringing more nature, allowing people to maybe participate a little bit in the future. Yeah.
Okay, so I understand for Park Royal Pickering and the recent open Pan Pacific in Orchard. Both of, I know these two, they incorporate the idea of nature very well because they actually help to reduce the carbon footprint.
Right.
And I also understand that because for guideline wise, how much green you actually remove, you have to replace it back into the building.
Yes.
So at what line do you actually balance between what it reduces in terms of carbon footprint, or does it actually move towards greenwashing?
See, greenwash is only applicable, or we can be accused of it, when our project gives a false impression without clear definitions or proof of eventual performance. Means you're washing it and you try to kind of like basically, cover people's eyes, right? Okay. I think how the buildings evolve, for example, those WOHA projects, right, that you mentioned, evolve, what is driving the brief? For example, when I did One North, a Solaris at One North, it was a spiral green that's 1.5 kilometers up the building, together with Datuk Dr. Ken Young. The brief wanting to have this, right, it wouldn't exist. The developer Soybuild really used this spiral green to be the brand of the building. So the same for Park Royal Pickering, and certainly, and also in Orchard, like Pan Pacific Orchard, it becomes the brand, right? So, but that's what the commercial side sees, right? From the user point of view, it becomes biophilic, right? Okay, it changes the perception of the city. It's not like you look out, you just see a street. Look out, you see a garden, right? And of course, there are other so-called denizens, right, including birds and all that, who are happily nesting in all those areas. So it's this combination. It's more than just green plot ratio replacement, etc. and all that. When we did Solaris, we realized that, number one, we had less of our so-called pest birds like pigeons and all that, because it was very dense, bushy. And we had songbirds nesting, like the sunbirds and all that nesting there. And every morning you can hear the morning chorus of these songbirds. Yeah, the bee eaters and all, because we don't spray insecticide. You just let it grow. So I think if done properly, you are actually not greenwashing, but you are doing what we call regeneration. So the first thing you look at is, can you regenerate nature, systems, user in participation, can adapt, can flourish. That's the first non-greenwash thing you can do. The second is that you also need to make sure that the design can encompass new technologies and ideas. For example, Solaris had a roof that had no photovoltaics yet. So when they have a budget, they can put the photovoltaics. Now it's just a trellis. Think of circularity in the design. So if a lot of the interiors and all that can be designed for disassembly, do it, right? So that it's flexible. And be humanistic and naturalistic, because our clients may not know it, but all of us are human. We need social spaces. The environment has no voice. So you must bring nature in, be their voice. Yeah. Then it's less greenwash.
It's talking about sustainability and how we can improve as a society for sustainability wise. Do you think architecture can quietly teach people how to live more sustainably? Background information, both Chee Yung and I have worked on a sustainability project together. Then we both share the similar idea or the vision for the space. So it'll be good if we can share with the public on our vision for this. So this sustainability project was one of the first few projects that I wanted to tackle in terms of the behaviorism of human. Because nowadays, or it has been many years that everybody just tells everybody, come, let's be sustainable, let's reduce plastic waste. But it's not something that a lot of people are constantly active about. So I wanted to target this project in the way where we use human nature. We let the visitor and the volunteer to come together to have this feel-good factor. And then let this feel-good factor be the spark for them to bring it back home and say, okay, let's just grow a new plant, or let's reduce air conditioning, electricity, or carbon footprint? Do you actually enjoy that project, or what was your vision for the project?
Yes. Well, for the audience, this project was prepared, but due to some funding issue, it didn't go ahead. Before it was abandoned, actually we planted many trees there, right? So it was a green space. It was a empty plot of land, and we wanted to have containers that we could reuse, and I wanted to have a kind of like Miyawaki forest there, so that eventually if HDBs are built on the site, whatever structures we build could be disassembled and brought to the roof, garden, etc. Very important in terms of the project was that there was this constant idea of the users bringing in recycling material to do crafting, not only communities in bloom type of planting, but also permaculture, so that they could use kind of organic material to create compost and participate in it. The idea is to create this kind of village feel where everybody is recycling, enjoying the space. Elderly, instead of wandering around their estate, they can go there and see children playing. And there were like NPark exhibits, NEA exhibits. There's a petting, even a rabbit petting area, things like that, right? Because we were trying to bring in nature so that everybody enjoys it. And there's some sign of permanence, because eventually, maybe 10 years time, the trees will be like a nice forest and you can build around it and things like that. So the idea of making green as part of people's lifestyle, but not only green, participative green.
Yes.
Means you literally plant vegetables there and harvest for yourself. You use recycled cardboard to build furniture, all this other stuff, right? There's a DIY space where you can repair equipment, etc. So, and it was seen as a green innovation space. So as part of this heartland renewing ideas, right? Okay, this could be one of the strategies. But if we cannot do that, I think there are people like City Sprouts who are trying to create something like that, innovation space in old schools, right? But ultimately, because it's not part of our value system, we don't gain points volunteering there, right? Okay, if we can gain points, as in you considered a good citizen, or good, have a better chance in a good school and all that kind of thing. These are social points. If you can do that, I think the participation will be higher. It's just to bring people there. It's not to eventually make it like a reward system, but once people participate, right, and they feel the joy of planting things and creating things with their own hands, being creative, being social, it really changes them. And that's the whole point. Then you run by itself. I think it's really important because I'm helping it. I'm bringing a crew of students working on capstone project at for NAFA UAS at the Ground Up Initiative Kampong campus. And when they were there, they realized that the people are volunteering because they are happy doing it. They're not volunteering because they need points. They're just happy. There's no stress. Even the children there, feel that, start to behave like adults, because they are given a chance to create things themselves and things like that. So I think if we can have some more of these projects, which is not top-down, which is not just rewards-based, but creating, collaborating, recycling, planting, regenerating for the sake of itself, okay, for its own sake, then we are probably becoming a more mature society.
Yeah, which this what I envision as well. Like I didn't want to do it in a way where it becomes a reward system. Then people are doing it out of, like, say, because there is a benefit that they can get out of it, or working or to behave a certain way because of fear or so. I want them to be able to interact, like maybe say even a toddler interacting with granny at the community space itself, and then the granny will be more than willing to teach their kid. To me, as long as the kid or anybody picks up one thing, just one small thing from the community itself, whether is it to grow a new plant or to even save water or to reuse the water, then to me that is actually a successful vision.
Incredibly successful.
And then from there, that one thing that they learn, they feel good about it, and then it just moves on. Like the one you mentioned, where you notice that the people there are happy volunteering, even though there's no reward, but it's just because they feel good and they want to contribute back to nature.
And this is actual work-life balance. When you do something as a pay-forward system, these are time, growing stuff are paying. It's actually paying forward to the future, right? Okay. If we are just doing farming for the sake of money, it's very, very hard to pick money because it's a commodity that's quite cheap, right? And a lot of effort put into it. But if it's farming so that people can participate, they feel the pride of growing themselves, it's super fresh and tasty when they harvest it straight. These are initiatives that need to happen.
I think that even the idea of it, that because this whole concept doesn't have to be a physical space on its own. So the idea of it was to actually to be able to duplicate into different clusters of Singapore.
Little kampongs everywhere.
Yeah.
Little green kampongs everywhere. And when we say green, it's not, greenwash. It's right. It's green because people feel regenerated. There's a lot of social spaces. And the funny thing is it took a pandemic to make that happen. Like during COVID, people couldn't go to shopping centers because of air conditioning. Air conditioning is basically recycled air. And it's not filtered properly, basically the virus is still in the system. So by being outside, the UV light kills the virus. So you can be outside, right? That's why we realized that after COVID, we realized that city in nature is actually very good, and having spaces that allow you to be outside, to be naturally ventilated, right? A lot of sunlight and daylight. So you regulate your sleeping cycles, you get your vitamin D, you get a red light treatment without buying red lights, right? So all these things are really actually very good for everyone. And it should be practiced because everything is free. Sunlight is free. We don't like the sunlight, but the plants like it, right? Rainwater is free.
Yes.
Right? If you have to push it all the way, let it flow all the way to the reservoir to be pumped back to your house, instead of getting it straight from the sky, which one is better? Which one saves more energy? Correct? So in situ collection, in situ use, in situ creating new soil, in situ creating a better water table. These are the essentials.
Other than this sustainability concept where it brings like the kampong life back, it also promotes education as well, because you mentioned you brought students to from NAFA to these places for them to create awareness of this sustainable community, which is also good because you're exposing the new age of designers into this kind of environment and not just designing for aesthetic, for decoration. There's all this purpose behind it.
That's intentionality, purpose. And it's very important that for students and for the younger generation, what happens is now everything is online, right? In fact, they found the IQ development of the younger generation much slower than before. They are unable to adapt. Attention span is shorter because some people blame the system, blame the computer, blame the screens and all that. But at the same time, with what is to blame or what is the real problem is that humans learn better in the social setting. In a social setting, not the artificial setting. You get stimulated, but you don't learn as well. You don't become more resilient. You don't dare to make mistake and be forgiven. It always must be the right thing, must be the fixed answer and all that. So by experimenting yourself, working with peers, right, then people are more social, people are stronger over time. They build real resilience. Your neighbor knows you. When you don't turn up for your normal gardening, they can be concerned about you. Things like that, right? So these are very basic things that are sometimes priceless benefits of such initiatives.
And even because nowadays the social context, which is a concerning factor also, that a lot of elderly are living on their own.
Yes.
Like dying.
Loneliness is one of the biggest killers.
Yeah, so by having all these little kampongs around the different clusters of Singapore, I think it actually helps to create a social setting.
Yes. That's why the Harvard study, I think 80 over years or more, right, showed that social support is the one determinant of living happily and to the ripe old age. So when Singapore was under Netflix, when Singapore was claimed to be the Blue Zone 2.0, nobody believed it and I think everybody was right. We have not reached that level because that social setting is not there. But we have the technical setting in terms of healthcare, clean environment, all that, good diet, we have less sugar in our foods. But the social setting is not ready. So we need to make sure that social setting is ready. And it's not top down. It has to happen quite organically and it can be designed. I think the spaces that we design can encourage that to happen, right? If you have a window and the window looks up to nowhere, nobody's going to open the window. But if your window opens to a garden, why not? You open the window, right? So,
were there any projects that you have done that follows this kind of belief system or vision that you have been talking about?
My previous team was the landscape architect for Ang Teng Fong General Hospital, where there was a window for every bed and a garden at every window, And the beds are naturally ventilated, right? And tempered with filtered air conditioning to keep the temperatures at the comfortable level despite opening the windows. So that is one example where you encourage people to use the green and use less air conditioning, have daylight, etc. And natural air exchange. My other project, which is the Wet Science Building in NUS, it actually also has a hybrid system of sorts where on the ground floor, the doors are open towards the medical green and large fans are used to create air movement, and the chill water from the laboratories, right, are actually UV irradiated because it's still cold, right, because it's condensate water and brought down as a cascading waterfall at the ground level. So it's cooling the environment too. And we actually did a ventilation study, CFD study of buildings in NUS. We realized that when you have a void deck, where you have a tall building and an opening at the bottom, the building acts as a wind catcher. So at the bottom, there's always breezes flowing through. When it rains, door automatically closes and aircon turns on. So all these designs encourage you to always interact with the environment. You have a building that is actively evolving with the environment. This against a typical office building where it's just solid, sealed curtain wall, right? And you know what will happen? Most people will bring down the blinds because it's too glaring. Then once they bring it down, right, they never bring it up again.
Yeah.
See? So these are, I think we have to be more conscious of human behavior, human nature, and give them ideas to be attracted to the outside, to increase natural ventilation. And this naturally reduces energy use.
Yeah. Those that you mentioned, are there any other things in Singapore as an urban planner or architect, interior designer that you think can be done better other than the glass facade that you mentioned earlier?
I think this integration of green, the vertical sense, be more creative about it. It doesn't have to be a green wall where you're putting little pots that you have to maintain, on the surface. There are actually green planters that you can put in. It's not expensive to do, especially you can walk through and go around like Solaris. But we have 1.5 kilometers of planters, and the planters are also collecting rainwater. Also have special trees that go to a certain height, don't need maintenance, etc. So I think these ideas need to be integrated into the design over time. And this should be free GFA. Maintenance should be the culture of the people of the building. They can go there, What was really happy, for example, Solaris, is that at One North is that one day we were walking up and down filming the building, and we found somebody has decided to create a chili patch in the planter box. It's a good sign, This they are taking control of the space, right? Right. And so these kind of things, it doesn't always have to be wild plants or whatever. It can be edible plants, it can be whatever, right? Get them to participate. Yeah.
So, because sustainability in terms of green-wise, we understand that, we always have this association that green is always about plants, always about nature. But I believe that sustainability also has a subheader in what we call the adaptive reuse, where in terms of the Singapore context-wise, sustainability in terms of transport system, do you think is there something that we can improve as well? Say, for example, the bicycle lane, the car lane, the human traffic lane. Because for overseas, there's very distinct elevations of where the cars are, the human traffic, the bicycle. So there's less prone to accidents, any potential accidents happening. Do you think in Singapore, are we able to design in terms of an elevation wise?
I think we are already trying to do that. If we look at the master plans for Tengah, Punggol Digital, district, and certainly in Jurong Gateway, they are actually trying to make those things happen, right? But more than that, I think design for active mobility in the last mile, we can actually reduce the number of cars. I think roads take up something like 6% of our land. Can you imagine if you free up those roads?
6% only, yeah.
Something like that. I have a colleague, Mr. Leong Takman of Tiara Design. Actually, they did Para Pickering. And also I think the Marina Bay, the water desalination plant. Right? Okay. He has actually worked out a system on how to make our transport areas to be active mobility and food growing at the same time. So there are actually ideas out there. I think you have to go beyond kind of like blindly thinking about maintenance. Turf is just waiting for you to cut the grass. It's always about maintenance. Everything is about maintenance. The building must be maintained and all kind of things. Green should be participative. If people harvest it all the time, they don't need to maintain. So, right, and we must be cognizant that somehow maybe design in such a way that on the outside, the plants are always maintained, but inside you can do something. There's this outer layer that is unchanged and looks great, but the inner layer, you allow things to happen. It's just like how you create. Do you know how you create a butterfly garden? I know you don't like the bugs and all that. Butterfly gardens are created by having the host plants at the background. They are mostly weeds. So the caterpillars can destroy those plants and turn into butterflies, right? Turn them into butterflies. And in front are what you call the nectar plants. And they're the flowering plants. So you only see the flowering plants and you see the butterflies, but you do not know what's behind. So to deal with this phobia and the idea of orderly design versus disorderly design, nature can be a bit disorderly. I think having this kind of layering systems and all that being introduced into our designs allow those ideas to happen in our urban context.
Then how do you think the idea of sustainability and green design will change in Singapore in, say, the next 5 to 10 years, or has it already been in the progress of change?
I think it's in the progress of change. I'm actually working with people like Beyond and Edible Gardens to allow to kind of integrate new designs into buildings for high-rise urban farming, things like that. And we're actually looking at a nutrition index instead of just, this 30 by 30 ideas, right? So it's happening, not as fast as we would like it, because people cannot understand the value. So we must, number one, have a lot of pilots to find out the value of the design. Number two, train people so that they can be the champions that will drive this. To have many farms everywhere, to have many areas of nature everywhere. NParks is creating quite a good initiative called Nature Kakis. That's helping to let people learn about nature. But at the same time, there should be a group that's creating urban farming everywhere, things like that. So under my other society called the Circle for Image Sustainability, we are teaching permaculture and hoping to spread this practice all over Singapore.
Okay, so last question. What advice would you give to young architects facing today's challenges?
My humble opinion would be, at least from my point of view and my very, I would say, fulfilling professional journey so far, I find that architecture is the perfect profession to honestly understand, create, improve, and immerse oneself in new old and many other forms of meaningful realities. Architects actually create realities. Nobody from policy or those who can throw money at something will create this new reality of Singapore, which is the city nature. It's architects, let me say architects, engineers, the whole ecosystem working together. And once we have a strong technical and professional foundation, you need to go through the journey so that you know how to execute it. And it's a complex execution, right? Your work can reflect your key interests as the world is in need of passionate and creative leadership. Okay? We are actually the archi, which is the master, tecton, the builder of real space. And often, there's no need to build, as on-site nature is often already the panacea. It's already there. A true architect needs no awards nor monuments. In fact, our best epithet is, as Latin would say, si monumentum requiris circumspice or circumspice, which translates to, if you seek his monument, look around you.
Yeah, which I think the one thing beautiful about architecture and design is, like, for your case, you like to incorporate science with architecture. And then for me, I like to incorporate like human behavior, psychology, interior design itself. And yeah, then that's what makes it beautiful. Like, is to be able to incorporate all these other elements to create physical, spatial context.
Yes, the spatial design is very rich. The richer it is, the better it is. You need diverse ideas, diverse participants, right? It's not about one star architect. It's about everybody feeling like stars and shining inside that space, right? So I hope that the future architects think of it this way. The journey is not an easy one, just like any other journey, but you need to love what you do.
Yeah.
You need to know that it's not just designing for the sake of designing, not just for the awards, but for the pleasure of seeing the environment transform to new visions.
And then it's also the beauty of collaboration.
Yes.
Because a single architect alone will not be able to build everything from scratch. It has to, with different QPs, with different engineers, with the different designers, or even clients, developers in this case, to work out and to come up and to realize a physical space on its own.
Yes, like recently I just completed Eco Radiance, 870 acres of, we call it nature well-being master plan. And we actually had scientists down there recording about 109 species of animals, various plants, etc. We know that we cannot maintain all the plants in the development because it's a township, right, with residences and everything else. But we know what is there. We know how to regenerate it, because less than 1% of Singapore is actually the original rainforest. We have regenerated all of it. Why can't others do the same? Right? Let's be hopeful. Let's play a part in planting those seeds.
And also, you mentioned wellness also. Like, because nowadays, the whole mental wellness, mental health is very important and more recognized nowadays. So I think it's also good that in terms of architecture and design, we are going towards the prospect of caring more for the well-being and the human mind.
Yes, in NAFA UAS and our course of biophilic design, Bachelor of Arts in Biophilic Design Honours, the students are actually wearing mobile EEGs to understand the different brain waves that either creates the contemplative feel or even stress, and depends on where they are. By understanding their mind, they can certainly design better.
Okay, so we have come to the end of the interview. Thank you very much, Chee Yung, for sharing your insights with us. So for viewers out there, if you like what you see, do remember to share, like, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next episode.